Here's my cube, and this is going to be a separate object than my donut, and it's going to be a separate object from my cone. The way that I want to set these up in unwraps, I have my cube here, I've got my torus here, and I'm going to move that over to the second UDIM tile. This cube and this donut are going to be the same thing. This object is going to be up one. I'm going to assign these materials. Go down to assign new material. I'll put a Lambert on it. This is the red donut material. Assign any material, just another Lambert is fine. This is going to be like my metal cone. And then all three of these are separate objects. They're not merged. When I bring these in, I'll file export this. Owl Club, lesson, export, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then I'll go over in here, I'll say file new, and then I'll select my stuff. And I will use UV tile workflow, and I'll preserve UV tile layout per material. So that's why I had to set up those Lamberts. So now if I hit OK, errors have been found while splitting the mesh. Okay, so the unwrapping isn't perfect on this. Let me just go back here and scale this in. Scale this in. Oh, it might be this big end gone. That might be the problem. Might need a triangle fan there. I wanted to merge the center. There we go. There we go. And then I'll re-export this. And file new. Same thing. Use UV tile workflow. Select this thing. Open it up. Hit OK. Discard. There we go. It worked. And then over here, I have Lambert 2 and Lambert 3. And now I'm able to paint from one onto the other. Of course, these are apart, so I probably wouldn't need to in this particular instance. Now that they are set up to their materials, then I can paint on both of these at the same time. And when I select this guy by Control-Alt right-clicking on it, then I can just paint on this one. And even though these are all three separate objects, these two are kind of considered the same because they have these UV tiles set up. And that's essentially it. But what's fun about this, let me say I'm going to add in Smart Shader on here. I can actually click on this 3x3 and I can say, you know what, don't put that on the donut. Or take it off the cube, leave it on the donut. And I can just mask things quickly by UDIM tile. So that makes it super nice. Assign a shader to something and then only have it reflect on the ones that you'd like it to. And now you have material masking across UDIM. And then you can do fun stuff like having everything in the row have a certain materials by many different UDIMs. And you have like that many that you can use. So it's 99 or 100. I'll say, okay, file, export textures. It's not separated by UDIMs anymore. It's actually separated by materials. I'll just export out these metal ones at first. I'll use my output template. In my settings here, I will use my output template that is just AI metal, so it doesn't have any of the emissiveness. And so you can see I'm not exporting out emissiveness. And then I will export this to the same folder. Owl Club source images. Go to the hypershade. In here, I go, okay, so I would like to turn these two. I would no longer want them to be a Lambert. I would like them to be an AI standard. So if I right click and I assign new material, and then Maya always has this selected as a favorite. So you just out click of that and then you'll get everything. And here you type in AI standard surface. There's my AI standard surface. So now I want to import those files and that's okay. So there we go. I've got my 5. I hit export. Yay! It's written all 5 of them of each UDIM. So I have 10 now. And now I can pop over into here and they're all organized. I'll hit open on this. This is my base color. So I will call this Owl Club Gold base color. And I will plug that out color into the base color. And then when I select on this file node here, you see how right now it says 1001. That's how you know it's that first UDIM. So that's cool. It's this one, right? But in order to load in both of these without having a second file node, is you actually go to the UV tile moding here, UV tiling mode, and you select UDIM. The 1001 changes to a bracket UDIM a closed bracket. And you can see here it says 2 tiles found. It did find both of them. And if I turn my texture view on here, if I hit generate preview, boom, there's my base color. That's 1 down. And now I can create a new file node. And I can select this, double click this, go to my next file down here. I can go to my roughness. And I'll do the same thing. And I'll set this to Mari. It says, oh, okay, 2 tiles found. Great. Hit generate preview. After plugging this in. Now, as always, black and white maps, you want to use the out alpha. You're going to plug that into the specular roughness, and then you have to go into the file node and make sure that under color balance that it's set to alpha is luminance. So that way the out alpha has the luminance value as its output, which the luminance value is the grayscale value, which looks like that. So that will actually be the true value instead of just the alpha, which would be pure white. And then the last thing we need to do to make sure that this is done correctly is change the color space to raw, because we don't want to color correct this map because it's data. We can color correct this map as an sRGB color space because we actually are looking at this in an sRGB color space because the color information is important to us to see. On a roughness map or a normal map or a height map or a bump map or anything that's not an actual color designed for color, we're going to want to leave that in raw because this has 0 to 1 information. It goes from like really dark to really bright. That's actually, you know, a number value associated with this. And so we don't want to manipulate that number value by changing its color space into some color corrected format. Now, what you can also do here, especially if you want to get crazy with tiling or something like that, that's control middle click drag. It will automatically connect those together. And then you can just get rid of this one. And this place 2D texture basically tells the file node which UVs to use and what to do with the UVs if they go outside of the space, how many times you want to tile it. You can tile the UVs 5 times each here. And then if we update the preview, but it's essentially the same as tiling the UVs 5 times. Any UV changes you want to make only once instead of for every single texture map that's plugged in. It's much more efficient from a human point of view. Let me break this out. I don't like how I can't see stuff. So just going to branch this again. Then I'm going to add in the rest of them. That's going to be a new file node. I can use the same place 2D node, control middle click, drag that right onto the thumbnail. Cool. So that way it's going to be using exactly the same UVs. Open this up and let's do the height. And the height's like a bump map. And the bump map's like, oh no, what do I do with the bump map? If you're an Arnold, all you got to do, super simple, use the AI bump 2D node and you plug the bump map. Is it the alpha? Yeah, into the bump map. If we are using the out alpha, what do we got to do? Got to make sure that alpha is luminance is checked, color space is set to raw, just like the roughness map. And then you plug that AI bump 2D node right into the normal camera node. You can see it has no roughness value. We disconnected that map, and so we have no roughness value. The roughness value pops up to 1.0 by default. And so if I turn that down and just do a little region here, you'll see it'll get super duper shiny. And then if I add in this roughness map, plug the alpha into the specular roughness, then I will see what the result of that is. And you can see, okay, that's a difference. So it goes from super shiny to rougher, and also it's changing in roughness depending on whether it's that black area or it's that gold area. The roughness map is working. And then if I plug in my AI bump 2D node into the normal map node and I re-render this, then you can also see it's like, oh, it's pretty subtle. I don't really notice the difference. Maybe the bump map is really subtle. Let me see if I can just crank this. Oh, the bump height is set to 0.01. But if I put it at 1.0, we should be able to see it. It's not pretty, but it's there, you know, so it's bumping these things out. And then I plug in my next one is a file node, control, middle click, drag from there to theirs and get rid of this one. And then go to this file node and plug this in, my metalness. What do we got to do if it's black and white map or out alpha?
Change it to raw. And alpha is luminance.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I know it might seem a bit silly that I've repeated it so many times, but trust me, I've made that mistake so many times. Look what just happened. I just tried to plug my map into the metalness and it popped over to the diffuse roughness. That's not at all what I wanted. And then when I delete that, you'll notice that my diffuse roughness now popped all the way to 1.0. That's not what I want either. So sometimes if you misconnect it, then you'll start to get crazy values over here that will make your shader look weird and you won't know why things broke. But now if I add that metalness map in there and I've set the alpha as luminance and I've set the color space to raw, now we've got some metals going on, and you can see kind of step by step where we came from. And then if we go, but wait a second, this doesn't look anything like what I painted it in Painter. Look at how much better it looks in Painter. I hate the way it looks in Arnold. And it's like, well, that's because Painter behaves as a PBR rendering engine differently than a ray tracer like Arnold, that you're going to actually have to go in here and go, okay, if it's too dark, then you need to go over here. Well, first of all, you should have a standard 3-point lighting in here that if you plug in like a gray shader ball, which is like, you know, one of these spheres. This is a 50% gray ball. If I have this like 3-point lighting set up on this 50% gray, then I'll know that if I compare that to my Painter and it looks completely different, then I might need to put a color correct on top of it just by adding a filter and adding a HSL and then just brighten it up. Oh, I have to set this layer to pass through. So that way it takes the information from the layers beneath it. And you can see that if I change it, then I will brighten up. And it might look like garbage in Painter now, but if I re-export that, it renders correctly in my look development environment in Arnold, then it's right. Who cares what it looks like in Painter? The only thing that matters is what it renders like in your rendering software, which in this case is Arnold. So if I re-export that and I hop back over here to Maya, then I'll go over here, and sometimes it happens automatically. Sometimes you got to click this little button here, reload. And then I'll keep image and re-render this. And you can see that I brightened it up. This is the 50% gray sphere that you want, which in this case it's not, it's just a Lambert. I would need to make it, but that's okay. If that's the 50% gray sphere that you want it to be, and this is still too dark, then you know that it's not your lights that are too dark, it's your textures. But if you look at this sphere back here and it is way too dark and it's a 50% gray sphere and it's way too dark, well then it's not your textures, it's your lights. You do end up having to interpret this because how it looks in Painter is not anything how it's going to look in Arnold. That applies not just for the color, but also the height, also the roughness. You can see that the height here is like kind of chill. It's like, it's a little bit bulbousy, but on Arnold set to 100%, it's really, really cranked. And so maybe we do need to have this AI bump map 2D node a little bit weaker, and maybe at 0.2. And if you want to use the normal map instead, you use an AI normal map node and you plug in the file just like this, create a file, plug that file into here, plug this color into the input. This is also going to be a data map. Not alpha's luminance doesn't matter because we're not using the out alpha, we're using the RGB, but basically the RGNB are all black and white maps. It's the red channel that's a black and white, it's a green channel, it's a black and white, and it's a blue channel, it's a black and white. When those three are combined, we get color. We're interpreting that as 3 data maps, and so we want to definitely make sure that this color space is set to raw as well, and then we can plug that one into here instead of the AI bump map 2D. If I just go to that normal map file, then it should be quite similar. Set this to UDIM. Set this to raw. I don't know why it flipped back, but set that to raw. Then if I re-render this, and you can use normal maps. Okay, that is, ooh, I think it's working if I disconnect it and re-render this. It's just that the bump map was cranked so high that the intensity was a lot more. So yeah, you can see that there's a difference between these two. And the normal map is a lot closer to the Painter render. It's a lot more subtle. But you can crank this one too. You could just multiply it by 10 if you really want to get the juice out of it. But it's not going to, if you multiply it by 10, it's probably not going to have the resolution in terms of the depth in order to capture it well. But actually it did pretty good. I'm pretty impressed. So that's kind of how you do it. There is, like I was saying, a way for you to plug these in together using the AI bump and the normal. And I think if we do this, it will work. I'm not 100% sure on that. I haven't done it in a while, haven't needed to. I basically only use the normal maps, But if you do have a case where you want to use both, there is a way to combine them. I'm pretty sure that you just need to plug the bump map into the AI normal map normal node. Yeah, now it's really like they're multiplying against each other. This should work. If it doesn't work, then that's something that you should let me know. Does that answer all of your questions about plugging stuff in?
That helps a lot. Thank you so much.
No worries. No worries.